Welcome everybody to the topic of cybersecurity and how to protect your business. We had a lot of interest in this for a lot of great reasons. So hopefully we can answer some of your questions today. Please put yourself on mute. We will allow time at the end for questions and answers, but we'll take questions throughout the presentation. So if you have questions throughout, Kim, who you heard from just a second ago, is here with me and she'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions as we go along, please pop those into chat and Kim will be calling those out for me as we go through the presentation. So with that, I am your host. My name is Jenny Zerflu and I am currently the Cyber Risk Manager at Incredible Bank. I have been in the banking industry for 27 years, going on 28. And through that entire time, I've been in risk management in some way, shape, or form. I have spent the last 10 going on 11 years with Incredible Bank and spent that time not only in risk management, but as their information security officer. And for the past almost 2 years, I've been dedicated almost solely to cyber risk management because it is such a growing threat for everybody. I will disclose right up front, I am not an IT person, so I can't give you any technical IT advice. I do have an entire team of technical people behind me at the bank that I rely on for that component. So this will not be an IT presentation. So if you were looking for an IT presentation, this is not going to be it. And so with that, let's move right into today's topics of cybersecurity. Just the fact that so many people had an interest in this presentation today tells me that our customer base at Incredible Bank recognizes the potential threat that lies in cybersecurity. And studies are done on this all the time. But what I will say is some of the most shocking statistics came out of this year after COVID. And what we found is that 94% of the businesses that were surveyed in various surveys are telling us that they have had some form of cyber attack so far in 2020. Almost half of those are aimed at small and medium-sized businesses. So this is no longer a game where the target is just the big guy. You guys are becoming targets at almost an exponential speed. And so I'm glad that you're here with us today because you've got to be able to protect yourself. Because here's the deal. We have an average loss of $200,000 for every event that happens to a business. And the studies have shown that businesses, small and medium-sized businesses that incur that level of loss don't last more than about 6 months from the time that they incurred that loss due to a cyber event. So this is pretty scary stuff. And this $200,000 average loss, you can say, yep, national study, I get it. But I watch the numbers of what's reported from our customers and what we're aware of with our customer base. And I can tell you that we're seeing an average loss event when it happens to one of our customers of right around 145,000. So it's not far off from the national average. And I don't know about you, but I don't know too many small businesses that can take a hit of $145,000 and keep going without missing a beat. So this is pretty important stuff to be prepared for. Some of the shocking statistics to me were that 66% of you out there still don't believe that you're likely to become a target. And I hope that after today, you take this very seriously because businesses that suffer a compromise most often don't even know it. So 63% of businesses out there probably suffered through a compromise already, and they just don't know it yet. Okay, and only 14% of you really at the end of the day are prepared to defend yourselves from a cyber threat. And so I suspect that's why most of you are here today. And we're going to give you some tips to help defend yourself as we go forward. There is a myth about regulations protecting you from these losses. And so I want to make sure we talk about that today. It's pretty important. There's a regulation called Regulation E. So we don't get very creative with our regulation names. They all have a letter of the alphabet attached to them, but regulation is for electronic transactions.
Let's see.
I was going to add
Somebody's not muted.
Okay.
Could you mute yourself?
right photos in there.
So Regulation E stands for electronic transactions. And the gist of it is if you have an unauthorized withdrawal electronically from your deposit account, you can file a dispute. And the bank will have to provide what's called provisional credit. So we give you that money back while we investigate it. If it's deemed to truly be unauthorized, you get to keep that money and the bank effectively suffers the loss on your behalf. But here's the deal that most people miss. Regulation E is a consumer protection regulation only. So business deposit accounts are not covered by the regulation. They are not covered the same way your personal checking account would be. So if you suffer a loss because of a cyber attack, somebody got your online banking credentials and ACH some money out of your account, that loss is yours. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think that the bank is there to help cover that loss. And in a business account, that is not the case. So I want to be very clear on that.
Jen, before you move ahead, I have a question. Will you also talk about insurance policies that cover claim to cover your cyber attacks?
Yep, I am going to talk about that because that is one of the things that, one of the security tips. If all else fails, make sure that you have some sort of cybersecurity policy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to that toward the end. But the fact that the regulations don't protect your business accounts really means that there's a growing impact to businesses, because the more and more businesses that are impacted by these cyber threats and have this financial loss, they're learning very, very quickly that they're out that money. And so it has a very significant impact on businesses. Even if it doesn't have an impact of financial loss, direct financial loss, what we found is in instances of ransomware, and we'll talk about these and what they are in a few minutes, but it's very disruptive to day-to-day operations. And sometimes it can completely render your operations basically stagnant and you can't function for certain periods of time, which means that you're not generating revenue. Okay, so there is that indirect financial loss that can happen from all of these things as well. So let's talk about how the bad guys are doing these things. Almost every attack that happens starts with some sort of social engineering attack. And social engineering is basically the art of hacking the human. So the bad guys are going to pretend to be somebody that you trust or your employees trust, and they're going to get you to do something or give up something that you normally wouldn't do. And there are basically 4 types of attacks that we're seeing most often. There's more than this, but these are the most common that we are seeing happen to our businesses. And the first one is phishing. So phishing is basically where the bad guys send an email. They pretend to be somebody that you would normally get an email from, somebody you would trust, something that's urgent, might even be a free coupon for food, who knows. But they get you to click on something or open an attachment within that email. And then bad things happen after that. So phishing is when it happens via email, and that is by far the most popular channel that we're seeing social engineering attacks on small businesses come from. The next vector they're using is called vishing. It's similar to phishing, but it happens with a phone call. So they're calling you. So the V is more for voice. So it's happening when they call you and try to get information about, say, your computer system or your bank accounts. Smishing is when it happens via SMS texting. So that's a text. So smishing is texting. Same thing they're trying to accomplish. They're just doing it via a text message on your mobile device versus an email or a phone call. And I'm going to tell you that they're getting a lot of information that they can use against you via social media and web mining. So think about all of the things that are out there about yourself, your business, your employees that sits out on social media or the internet, right? There's a lot of it probably on your websites alone. Who are the primary contacts? Who are the owners? There might even be a contact us with an email schematic that they can copy and leverage to try to get through. But there's so much data out there that they're able to craft these phishing campaigns or these smishing campaigns. And it's very, very hard to know and determine if they're fake or not, because they already know so much about you. And if they know so much about you, you assume that they're legit. And so that's kind of the danger with having so much of our information out there today. So there are 3 types of attacks that I've seen happen. 2 of these attacks are a form of what's called account takeover. And the first one is business email compromise. This happens a lot, and it has 2 very dangerous results. They're different, but they're very dangerous. So it all happens, again, generally with some sort of social engineering attack, most often with a phishing email that's sent either to you or one of your employees. It's coming from the bad guys. And if you're not careful and you don't recognize it, you're going to click on a link in there, you're going to open an attachment, you're going to do something that's going to allow them to basically take over your business's email account, your inbox, your contacts, and it's going to start sending out things to all the contacts within your email system. It could be one of 2 things. They could send out basically the same thing that you received. So it would be a phishing email that would look like it's coming from you, which means the recipients are more likely to click on it because it's coming from a legitimate email box and somebody that they do know and recognize. And when they click on it, it could launch the same thing and take over their email box and send stuff out. What could also happen is they could dig through your email chains and send something to your contacts. For example, we had an instance where we had a business had their email account compromised, actually sent a invoice request or a request for payment of an invoice to somebody in the finance department, and made it look like it was coming from basically one of their suppliers. So somebody they would normally get a request from. And if you don't recognize some of those slight differences or think that it's odd, maybe it's coming to you directly and it normally goes to an accounts payable email box or something. But if you don't recognize it, you're apt to send payment. And when you send payment, that money's gone. And the thing is when you send payment in an event like this, you have authorized it. So it no longer becomes an unauthorized transaction anyway out of your account, because you physically authorized that money leaving. It just went to a bad guy and not where it was supposed to go. The other part of account takeover that we see a lot starts the same way, exactly the same way. A phishing email, they get you to click on something. Once you click on that, it might take you to a screen that looks very similar to your email system or very similar to your online banking platform or something. And it's going to ask you to log in. But when you're logging in, it's recording your keystrokes. So they're capturing your usernames, your passwords, your logins. And effectively then what they're doing is on the backside, they're able to get to that platform, log into your online banking account, and effectively take that over and start sending money out the door to themselves. We've had 5 customers that I am aware of had this happen to them so far in 2020. And the end result is there were losses of almost $450,000 for those 5 customers through an event like this. So be very careful with this one. We see this quite often. The other one that you hear about quite a bit, and we've seen it happen and it's starting to ramp up, is ransomware. You heard about it a lot in the healthcare industry, but now they're taking it to kind of the general business population. But what happens is, again, it starts with a phishing email. They get you to click on something. When you click on something, it launches basically malicious software that basically locks up and holds hostage your entire computer network. And they ask for a ransom so that you get either your data back or access to your network back or whatever they've locked up. They ask for a ransom. They generally will ask for that ransom in the form of Bitcoin or some other sort of cryptocurrency. And unless you pay that ransom, your data is gone. It's locked up, it's corrupted, you don't have access to it. And that's kind of scary when you think about it, you know, especially think about some of our businesses that are manufacturing companies. how much of their manufacturing line is tied into the network in some way, shape, or form. Because as technology progresses, everything's tied to the network, right? And if they lock down your network, you can't make product, you don't have your inventory documents, you don't have access to your point of sale system. Everything gets locked up and you can't function until you paid the ransom to get that back. And here's the deal with the ransom. You can pay that ransom, but sometimes you're not even guaranteed that they're going to unlock your data. So that's a scary thing. You could be out this money and still be out all of your information without access to your computer system. We've had 2 customers that I'm aware of had this happen to them this year so far. One very recently, and I will say that the request was for over 250,000 in Bitcoin. And the value of Bitcoin varies, but that equates to a little over $500,000 overall in ransom in US dollars to get their data back. So it's pretty scary situations when it happens. And again, you're not even guaranteed to get your stuff back. So let's talk about some of the things you can do to defend yourself, right? Because that's really why you're here at the end of the day. And I'm going to tell you that the first thing that I'm going to recommend is that you take a cybersecurity assessment, because you don't know what you don't know. And every business is different. You have a unique IT environment, you have a unique business model and business environment. So you've got to go through an assessment process to really identify where your unique gaps in this cyber world are. The University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point and the Small Business Development Center that's associated with UWSP, they do free cybersecurity assessments. So if you take nothing else away from today's seminar, take a screenshot of this slide, or please write down this link. And I'll have Kim maybe post a link in chat so you can copy it as well. But please take advantage of this. It's all online, so you can take the assessment, and then from there you can try and determine, how to go about securing your business or where your gaps might be.
Jen, we have a question. Do you know the current odds of actually getting your data back if you do pay the ransom?
I don't. I will tell you that I am aware of at least 2. They're not Incredible Bank customers, but 2 businesses that did pay ransom in 2020 and were not able to get their information back.
So a lot of times if this happens, you don't pay that, and hopefully you have a good backup system.
Yes, and that will be another cybersecurity tip you see coming up, is make sure you have backups and make sure you back up very often. And we'll talk about that in just a second. All right. Educate yourself and your staff. If you do anything as far as education and cyber events, don't do technical type training unless it's your IT staff. What you really need your people to be trained on is how to identify a fake email or a phishing email. And that could be a webinar in and of itself. I mean, there's so much to train on. We train our staff. I manage an entire training and awareness program. If that is something that you're not sure how to go about yourself and think there might be value for us doing a follow-up webinar, that's how to identify these types of emails, please pop something in the chat for Kim, and that will help her gauge interest, and we'd be more than happy to help provide that education. But make sure you can spot a phishing email, because if they don't click on something malicious, then you don't have to worry about what comes afterwards, right? But the second they click on something, honestly, you're kind of screwed. So make sure you can educate yourself and educate your staff. Take advantage of account controls, because like I said, Regulation E is not going to protect you. Once that money leaves your account, it's effectively gone. Monitor your account, monitor the activity, monitor it daily, monitor it hourly, because in today's electronic and digital world, that money can be gone in 2 seconds. In the old days, when everything was all check-based, you could probably wait 30 to 60 days and reconcile your account, and you could still stop that check somewhere along the way. That's not the case with electronic transactions today. You have a window of opportunity to stop that transaction that's very, very small. If you think that this money is gone and it's unauthorized, you can let us know. We have some ways to reach out to other banks where this money might have gone to, trying to recover the funds on your behalf. But I'll tell you, that's probably a crapshoot on whether we're actually going to be able to recover funds or not, because again, that money travels very, very quickly through the system. So leverage account controls. If you do have deposit accounts or do any sort of ACH type origination, please look at leveraging what's called positive pay services on those accounts. Those are great controls to help with electronic transactions. Basically, you'll establish a list with the bank of different ACH sort of recipients to your funds. And whenever a new payee or something gets added, we're going to check that against that list. And you'll get a notification if there's some money going out that doesn't basically match who you told us it should be going to. And then that money gets held. It won't leave the bank until you physically go into your account and authorize it to be released. So take advantage of those. And monitor your accounts. I can't say enough. Monitor your account activity and monitor it often. Spam email controls. So no matter what email system you're using for your business, there's a thing called spam and junk email, right? We all get them. But there are controls in almost every system that you can put into play to help stop these emails from coming in. So if you can stop them from even getting to your employees in the first place, you will eliminate some of this traffic, because some of these will come in, and because the bad guys aren't necessarily doing what's called spear phishing, they're not necessarily specifically targeting you and your employees. They're just sending out this bulk mass email to a bunch of email addresses, hoping that they get lucky and some make it through the system, and then hoping that they make it and get even luckier that somebody will open them and click on something. So spam email is what will generally catch emails that are kind of coming and have the characteristics of like a bulk or junk type email. So make sure you can catch those and eliminate those out of your system, because that will significantly minimize the risk of those sort of emails getting to your employees. Antivirus and anti-spyware. So it's really important that you have these sort of tools on your system and that you keep them current. One thing I will say about this is that they're always behind the bad guys a little bit. So what happens with most of these software tools to catch viruses and malicious software from being launched on your system is that they have to wait for a virus to be known, and then they can write something to catch it. So you're always going to have a little window of opportunity. If the bad guys create something new, you still run the risk of catching that. But anything that's known should be stopped and blocked by this software. So if in fact somebody would click on something that launches this, you're going to want this as up to date as possible, so that this tool can help stop those from spreading throughout your network. Password controls. So this is really important, because we talked about, a lot of times they're going to get you to enter your credentials and then they capture your usernames and logins. But there are certain things you can do to make that a whole lot harder for the bad guys. Password length is one of those things. The longer they are, the better. There's guidance out there, right, that says make sure they contain letters, numbers, uppercase, lowercase, special characters, all of those things. But at the end of the day, the longer that password is, the harder it is for the bad guys to capture that password or to crack that password. Make sure people don't share passwords. So make sure every employee you have has a unique login to something, particularly your online bank accounts. Make sure every user has their own credentials, because you don't want to be sharing passwords. The other thing you want to make sure you do is use passphrases. Don't use dictionary words. Again, don't share them. And there's something called multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. And that's where you enter your credentials, which is one layer of authentication. But once those are entered, then they'll send something different, and they'll send it to, say, your mobile device. So when you log in, then you'll get an authentication code coming to your mobile device. So if the bad guys get your password and try to get in, you're going to know because you're going to get that code sent to your phone, and you'll know it wasn't you. But then the bad guys won't have that code. So they won't get past that second layer of protection unless they've stolen both your credentials and your phone. And believe me, I think more of you protect the heck out of that phone than you do your laptops or anything else of value. So adding another layer of protection on your passwords will help as well. So even if they do get your credentials, you've added another hurdle and barrier for them to actually access anything. Computer and software updates. So, you know, a lot of you probably don't have in-house IT people that are managing this for you. You're relying on, you know, outsourcing that or a third party to manage your IT support. What you're going to want to make sure is that they're also updating your system, your network, the operating system, and all the software that you're using. Because what happens is almost on a weekly basis, the software vendors and the computer operating system providers come out with updates. And a lot of these updates are security updates or bug fixes that close security gaps that the bad guys have been known to use to get into these softwares. And so you want to make sure that that's continuously being updated. I mean, think about your phone and how often you see app updates. That's nothing compared to how often computer and software updates happen. And so if you don't update the security, you're just leaving a hole and a door for those bad guys to come through if they get in. So if you do outsource your IT, this would be a conversation I would recommend you have with them. How often are they updating your software and things like that? Because it should be happening almost daily. Kim hit on this one, and that's about backing up your systems, because if they do happen to get in, lock up your data, if you can't get it back, your only hope is to go back to the last set of basically duplicate data that you made, your last set of backups, and restore that data. Backups used to happen sometimes only weekly. Then they went to daily. But I'm going to tell you that what you don't want to do is have a window of time where you have to recreate an entire day's worth of transactions within your system. And that's effectively what it would do. Back up your systems as often as you can. You know, I would recommend it's hourly or at least multiple times throughout the day, because from the time of your last backup to the point where your data is locked up, where you have to restore from, that's the window of transactions and data that you have to recreate or be able to recreate. And so you want that to be as short as possible within your business. If you're running these backups, you also want to test the backups. So periodically, you want to pretend that something happened and you want to go get one of your backups and you want to try to restore your data from that backup. And the reason you want to do that is because what will tend to happen is the perfect storm. You'll have something happen. You'll say, I've got these backups. They've been running just fine, but you go to restore them. And for whatever reason, something is wrong with the restore. You're unable to restore from backup. And you have to go even further into your backups, or maybe you're not able to restore at all. So you have to test those periodically to make sure that you're actually able to restore that data if you need it. Because there's nothing worse than thinking you can rely on your backups and you're covered and you're good, and then your backup fails as well.
Jen, do you know if something called carbonite is a good way to back up?
Yeah, so carbonite is one of the methods and one of the vaults that can be used to back up. There are several of them, and they're all pretty good. It'll just be a matter of how comfortable you are with either backing up to the cloud or backing up to a physical system that, say, is at your IT provider's space. So there's risks with both. It's just a matter of your comfort level. But yeah, there's a lot of great tools out there to back up your systems, and any of them will do the job for you. Mobile devices are computers, so I can't stress this enough. So we talked about the mobile devices as far as being kind of near and dear to everybody's hearts, but they are computers. At the end of the day, your smartphones are computers. And so the bad guys can contact you on them. We talked about the vishing and the smishing. So they can contact you through those devices. And how many of you are connected in some way, shape, or form to your business network through those devices, even if it's just to your work email? You're connected to that network, and they can get through those devices to the network. Those devices can also be susceptible to viruses and things like that. And you don't want any of those things to happen to your device because that could render your device useless. So the things that you want to think about with mobile devices, if you're allowing those to connect to your network, whether it's yours or your employees, make sure that you enforce passwords. They should have passwords, biometrics. There's a lot of security functionality that's native, depending on whether you have an Android device or an Apple device. They are different, but each one has their different security functionality. Make sure you enforce that security functionality and protect that device just like you would your laptop or your desktop computer, because that's what they are. And here we get to insurance, because at the end of the day, you want to have insurance. This is not a matter of if something happens to you. It's a matter of when it happens to you. And when it happens, you need to have somebody on your side. And this is really where you mitigate that financial loss. You're still going to lose whatever your deductible might be, right? But rather than losing $145,000, I'd rather lose a $10,000 deductible on a cyber insurance policy. Most places are offering cyber insurance policies. They are not cheap. They really aren't cheap. And what'll happen is you'll get asked a lot of questions by the underwriters about what controls you have in place and what you're doing to help protect your data and your financial accounts. And then you'll work through all of that with your insurance company, and they'll issue you a policy. Usually if you have an event happen, you want to contact your insurance company first. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, if you have a data breach, which means that the bad guys got through your system and they've gotten your customers' data, right? So they've stolen credit card information from your customers. There are data privacy laws. There's a lot of legal action that has to be taken. There are notification requirements that have to happen. And most often your insurance company will assign you a data privacy attorney that will help coordinate all of those things and make sure that you're following all the different legalities, and they are different per state. So if you have customers located in 50 states, you need to be aware of what all 50 data privacy laws are and the notification laws in each state, because it's where your customer is located that comes into play and governs what you do, not where you are located. And so they have data privacy attorneys, and I will tell you that those are very different and they are very specialized in this. I would not leverage just a regular attorney, because your regular business attorney is not going to know enough about this to help you in these situations. They will also help you engage a forensics team if you need to have a forensics team come in and track down the bad guys within your systems. If you need to do any of that work, your insurance will help coordinate that. They have a lot of resources behind them, and they will get you the experts. So make sure you do that. The other thing is that I don't know too many small businesses that just have a Bitcoin account sitting around waiting for something like this to happen. And so the window of time you're given in a ransom sometimes can only be a matter of a couple of days. And you may or may not be able to establish a Bitcoin account and get it funded enough to transfer any of that money in time to meet the ransom requirements. But your insurance company generally has access to those on your behalf, and they can help get you through that ransom period a whole lot faster. So cyber insurance is really your best bet at mitigating some of those financial losses in a business account. They're not all foolproof. You might think you have coverage for something, and at the end of the day, they'll say, well, it really wasn't covered under your cyber policy. It's actually covered under something else, and then your limits are only X. So just like with any other insurance, sometimes they're hard to read and hard to understand what you have. But with cyber insurance, it's really worth having a lot of discussions with the carrier so that you understand exactly what type of events you're covered for, so that you go into it eyes wide open. The last thing you want is to have an event and think you have the right coverage, only to find out that you weren't covered for that. And like I said, it's not a matter of if, but when. So bad things are still going to happen to you. We have resources on our website. We have a cybersecurity section. And so you'll see these resources, and so you don't have to worry about copying this page down. If something does happen, we have this out here for you. Number one, we say contact law enforcement, all of these things. I would say you contact your insurance company as well. That's if you have cyber insurance, make that number one. You'll notice that necessarily contacting your bank isn't necessarily on here in the top 5, because you need to first stop the bleeding and stop the bad thing. You got to do triage first, and then you can let us know, and then we will help you reset passwords. We will put additional monitoring on your accounts. We'll help make sure nothing else happens on your accounts, but you've really got to get the key things taken care of first. And so just know you can do all of these things, you can take all of these steps, but something at some point is still going to happen related to cyber threats. And you need to be prepared for when those do. Are there any questions? Because this is the content that I had for you today. Again, I didn't want to go technical on you. If you think technical is going to be of value, pop that in the chat. Give us some ideas for how we can follow up and get you more education around cybersecurity. And then I can open it up for questions.